Thank you all for joining us today and welcome to the Monarch Butterfly Conservation webinar series. Today's webinar topic is Western Monarch Trail, Path to Collaboration. My name is Jenna Tots, Education Coordinator for the Monarch Joint Venture. We are excited to continue hosting this webinar with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services National Conservation Training Center. We are delighted to host this presentation from Kristin Howland, Executive Director of the Central Coast State Parks Association. Before we get started, here are a few expectations and community guidelines for the webinar. During the webinar, please put your questions in the chat box and we'll collect those for the Q&A session at the end. And just a reminder to keep the chat professional and friendly. Thank you in advance. If you do pause or click away or refresh the page while you're viewing the webinar, you will need to click the play button again. It will start where you left off. If you want to catch back up, you will need to slide the bar at the bottom of the video window. This webinar will be recorded and posted on both the NCTC and Monarch Joint Venture websites in 2 to 3 weeks. The entire Monarch Conservation webinar archive is free and available to watch and contains about 7 years worth of Monarch Conservation webinars on both of our websites. If you're joining us today but you didn't pre-register for the webinar, we would like to count you for attendance and be able to send you follow-up resources. So please email education@monarchjointventure.org with your name and email address. Thank you very much. And finally, all of our webinar speakers represent their own viewpoints, which are not necessarily those of NCTC or the Monarch Joint Venture. And now I'd like to introduce our presenter. Kristin is the Executive Director of the Central Coast State Parks Association and the Project Manager of the Western Monarch Trail. Kristin has over 26 years of experience in interpretation, natural resources recreation, preservation, conservation, outdoor education, management, and leadership. Prior to CCSPA, she was the Director of Education with the Catalina Island Conservancy and was a park ranger with San Luis Obispo County Parks for over 13 years. In addition, Kristin spent 3 summers patrolling the emigrant wilderness in Stanislaus National Forest and worked as a campground manager in Sequoia National Park. Born and raised in San Luis Obispo, Kristin enjoys camping, hiking, biking, gardening, and celebrating the Central Coast with her 2 young daughters and husband. Kristin, I will turn it over to you.
Sure. All right, just a moment. My computer did something strange.
No worries, take your time.
All right, can you all see that okay?
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. I'm grateful for everyone tuning in. I think we already pretty much covered this. Thank you, Jenna, but I just wanted to briefly tell you why I'm here and why this is happening. So on the screen, you'll see some photos of my history here, and me up there in the left-hand corner as a 2-year-old. So I laugh because this all started when I was 2. If you're on the therapy couch, right? I grew up with 2 brothers, played in the mud all the time. And although I had a traditional family, I totally resented the fact that I was supposed to be staying inside and cleaning the house and helping bake while my brothers got to play outside. So I fought that. I went through school and with very little direction and not real motivated. And then once I got into Columbia Junior College in the Central Sierras, found that I actually had this passion that drove me and I actually could succeed at it. So one of my teachers had sent me through the immigrant wilderness in the Stanislaus National Forest as a wilderness patrol ranger, and I absolutely fell in love. After leaving the Columbia Junior College, I went up to Humboldt State University and graduated with a degree in natural resources, recreation management, planning, and interpretation, and left there to go start as a lead visitor use assistant at Dorst and Lodgepole campgrounds in Sequoia National Park. Moving onward, came back home to San Luis Obispo, where I worked my way through seasonal position up to a supervising Park Ranger 3 position over a course of 13 years. And then jumped into my nonprofit work with the Catalina Island Conservancy as a director of education. And then back home again with my 2 young children for the Central Coast State Parks Association, which lands us where we are now. So there's this butterfly on the screen. You'll see the beautiful monarch on a Monterey cypress at the Grove in Pismo State Beach. So I think the most interesting thing for me in this whole process was that I grew up in San Luis Obispo. I often sat in the yard of my best friend's house next to a eucalyptus grove, and every fall there would be just monarchs surrounding us. Did I know the significance of this? No. Every November, we celebrated the monarchs coming to Pismo Beach, and my mom would ask us if we could go down there with her, and of course we would. And I can remember the hum of the monarchs and seeing hundreds of thousands of monarchs hanging from the trees, which was just breathtaking and amazing. But again, I did not recognize the significance of this. So it wasn't until I got here with the Central Coast State Parks Association that I started to really understand what was happening with monarchs, and understanding that there was these kind of a divide between the eastern and the western populations of them. So focus obviously for me being on the western population, which west of the Rockies versus east of the Rockies, and learning that not all monarchs go to Mexico to overwinter, but our monarchs here come to the Central Coast to overwinter. So the map that we're looking at here on the screen represents the entire population, eastern and western, of the monarchs. Thank you to Xerces Society for their map, and showing where the overwintering sites are versus summer breeding, spring and summer breeding, nectar areas, etc., and their migration paths. So why are monarchs important to us in San Luis Obispo? So, and especially to me, the Central Coast State Parks Association Executive Director. Well, the Central Coast hosts these critically important overwintering locations for Western monarchs. On the screen to the left, you'll see a beautiful cluster, almost in a heart shape, at the Pismo Beach Monarch Grove. And so historically, San Luis Obispo County has as many as 55 overwintering sites, and including one of the largest populations of overwintering sites, which would be the Pismo State Beach Monarch Grove. Historically, they've seen upwards of 300,000 monarchs in the early 90s, and we'll talk about where our population is now. So Pismo State Beach has, like I said, over 100,000 of monarchs roosting in the site, and they would do these wonderful talks, and over 86,000 people would come annually to the Grove over the course of the months that they were overwintering there, typically late October through February and March. You'll see the entrance there to the beautiful Monarch Grove, as well as the docents giving their talk, and another close-up picture of a cluster there in a eucalyptus tree. So it's a very beloved space and managed by our state parks. So in addition to the Pismo State Beach Monarch Grove, we have several overwintering sites in 4 other state parks on the Central Coast. So this is a bigger concept that we have 90 miles of coastline, over 10 parks on state parks that we support here on the Central Coast. So as we were talking about different fundraising events and things that we could do to support the Monarch Grove and the management and the interpretation and education of, we came up with the Butterfly Ball and thought this was just an amazing event. So we had the first event, it was beautiful, so much fun. And then we really started to see a decline. So right about 2019, 2020, you can see here that we had this huge decline in numbers. Although we were looking at more sites being monitored, the numbers were dropping significantly. So were we facing a possible extinction of the Western monarch when we started looking at the numbers of monarchs compared to the 1980s versus what we were seeing now in 2019, 2020, and 2021. So how now could we even make a bigger impact and talk to people about what was happening? How could we get people to understand the significance of this? And what was the cause of the decline? What was happening that was, so significant at this point? Well, of course, in 2019, 2020, we had those huge fires in Northern California, Oregon, and Washington. Was that a part of it? Or is it all OE parasite? Is it pesticides, insecticides? What are the different things that could be happening? Well, of course, the questions are still out there, and it's not just one answer. It's numerous answers to the problem. So how do we make a difference? And how can we make our efforts reach out further than just the Central Coast or just the Pismo State Beach Monarch Grove? And what are the issues that the managing agencies and research and scientists are facing? Which was a bigger question to me. Was, we know there's people out there working on this, but what issues are they facing with communication, and what messages did they want out there? So through a conversation with one of our board members and our state park liaisons, we came up with a model for interpretive trail panels that would now go through the migration path of the Western Monarch. And of course, we modeled this after the Whale Trail, which was inspired by Donna Sandstrom, and she's the founder of the Whale Trail. She was so lovely to let us be able to use her model for the Western Monarch Trail. So this is where the connection started. Excuse me while I take a drink of water here. So this discussion of how we were going to make an impact, how we were going to take this message further out from just San Luis Obispo County and the Pismo Beach Monarch Grove, where could we take this? And thought that this conversation of a larger trail connecting all of the different habitats and important landscapes and ecosystems that the monarchs use throughout their migration path was where we needed to go. So what is the Western Monarch Trail? So it's a series of sites along the migration path of the Western monarch butterfly in the Western United States. So again, west of the Rockies. This is a collaborative effort between several agencies for consistent education, outreach, and resource avenues that focus on preservation of the Western monarch. So the signage would identify and provide the public with the messages that the working group of scientists, researchers, land managers wanted out there to the public to help preserve and protect them and restore their populations. So Salt Bay came into this one because, a sprinkle of critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity. It's the perfect recipe for success. Of course, I laugh because how do you get all of these different agencies, interpreters, scientists, researchers, people who are very passionate about the Western monarch or the monarchs in general, land managers all together in a space and get them to agree on consistent messaging? I thought this would be a huge challenge. I mean, it's easy, but it went smoother than I thought it would. And why was that? It was because the consistent message that they wanted was relatively same amongst all the people in the focus group and the working group. So what you're looking at now is a screen with all the different logos of the organizations that were represented in the focus group. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife, California State Parks, of course, the Central Coast State Parks Association, the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, Xerces Society, a huge player in this. And I'm so grateful for Emma Pelton because she strongly believes in collaboration as well. The Utah Wildlife Resources, Arizona Game and Fish, California Fish and Wildlife, the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Services, California Native Plant Society, Caltrans, the San Luis Obispo County Parks. I mean, there was numerous folks. And what I really wanted to do was make sure that our focus was not just here in California, but really talked about the entire Western United States and the different populations, the different ecosystems, the habitats that each of these land managers and agencies were facing in restoring populations of monarchs and managing the resources for them. So the group is made up of federal, state, and private entities, as well as land conservation and management organizations. And then we couldn't go without talking to botanical gardens, nurseries, folks who are actually producing some of the milkweed and other resources that we needed for the monarch. So why do we need the Western Monarch Trail? Well, because of this lack of consistent messaging about what was needed for the monarchs to restore healthy populations and a healthy migration process. It was so much information going in there. And I think we know so much more about the eastern populations of monarchs, where they go, what their struggles were. And there's so many missing gaps of information for the Western monarch. However, there's certain messages that we do know. One is that we don't want to plant milkweed everywhere, that we need to have certain ranges that it was historically grown in, and make sure that those ranges are supported and conserved and protected, but also our overwintering sites are so critical, and they're disappearing because of climate change, because of habitat destruction, because of development. And then what are the nectar resources that they needed? So with this like drop in the monarch populations so significant, and everybody just kind of scrambling and not knowing a lot of the questions that needed to be answered in order to really do our best efforts in conservation, it became, let's just plant milkweed, let's get milkweed out there. And it doesn't matter what kind of milkweed, let's just get it out there. And so as that happened, you know, there is some correlation between these major conservation efforts without a lot of the technical scientific data to back what kind of milkweed we should be planting or where we should be planting. It was just get it in the ground. It was great in some aspects, but at the same time, that was the introduction of tropical milkweed widespread, and also the introduction of the OE parasite. So with the OE parasite, going into the healthy populations of migrating monarchs, there was another issue there. And then nectar gardens, and making sure that we had native nectar gardens throughout their overwintering sites, as well as their inland breeding and migration path, became a critical information as well. So we know historically in the overwintering sites here in California that we had longer winters, we were colder longer. And now as the area starts warming up sooner and they come out of the roost and they're more active, they're needing these nectar sources that technically they didn't need previously. So knowing that now we need to plant more nectar gardens around the overwintering sites. So it was a matter of like kind of formulating this information and then regurgitating it back out to the public that no, we don't need to plant milkweed anywhere and everywhere. But yes, we do need nectar sources everywhere, and native nectar and clean nectar, no pesticides, as much as possible wherever we can. So those kinds of messages were critical, and they were confirmed throughout the focus group of that's what we needed. So this picture here is at our butterfly ball for 2021. So this focus group that we started for the Western Monarch Trail started in March. Actually, I'm sorry. The idea of the Western Monarch Trail started in March of 2021. And by the time we got done with this focus group and creating the consistent message and working with our designers, Wildways Illustrated out of the Santa Cruz area, we got our first panel pretty much completed and ready for print by October for our butterfly ball. So it was really exciting to be able to take this project from conception to completion in just, a few 6 months or so, which was phenomenal. So we celebrated this at our butterfly ball, which is our second annual because we had to have the COVID close down there. So we were very excited to move forward with this project and present it at that event. So this is a close-up of the panel, and this panel, the first inaugural panel, was put in Pismo State Beach Monarch Grove. And so the theme of it was Keep Western Monarchs Migrating. And that was because we want them to have a healthy migration. And what is a healthy migration, and what do they need to do that? So it's kind of, put in here as briefly as we could, but obviously there's so much information and it's really hard to condense it down into, an interpretive panel that doesn't overwhelm people as they're looking at it. But I found the panel to be beautiful. I thought the messages got across, and we're able to see now how people can help and have the QR codes to guide them in other ways to other resources. And then, of course, we wanted to make sure that it was also represented in Spanish. So we have the Spanish version, and then as we need it, we will, translate it into other languages for more of our community members. So what are we looking at with this panel? So what we really wanted to do with them was to have them be a template. So the messages that the focus group came up with are meant to be consistent throughout all the panels. But we know that our sites are going to be changing. They're going to be different between California, Arizona, Utah. So how do we make it relevant to each site location? So what we have here is the panel with kind of what becomes customized versus what stays. So pretty much the whole top of the panel and the how you can help become our stationery or our template, versus that bottom left hand and across the bottom of the panel. So you're welcome to your site. We have a little bit of information about why the site is important to the monarchs, and maybe, what time of year they would come through there. We have the appropriate native plants. So Wildways Illustrated does an amazing job with their plant illustrations. So be able to put the native plants that are relevant to the site location where the panel will be. Obviously the "you are here," and then the logos that are relevant to the space. We try and make sure that all of our main focus group logos stay on the panel. And then we've also had some folks add their own QR code to be able to link back to their site to learn more about their site in particular. So of course, nothing is easy. We've got a turtle climbing a fence here to get to that pond. Not too different than what we did. We're like, okay, well, of course, there's going to be challenges when you have so much passion, but also you have different agencies with different expectations for their interpretive panels. How are we going to move forward? So we had one agency who really loved the panels, but they felt a need for it to be more family friendly. And they also wanted it to be less than 150 words per panel. So we came up with this. So this is our family-friendly version of the panel, and it's 4 different panels with all the content from the main panels. However, these ones be kind of led in a trail. So, placed at different areas along a pathway so people can read them as they go. These ones are not quite as customizable, but you can still, the bottom right, or excuse me, left-hand panel is kind of the customizable one. So that's where the logos on that one can be changed. The plants could be changed. And then obviously the "you are here" can be changed. So this helped address that need for something that was a little bit more digestible for children, but still meet the needs of our focus group and the mission of the project. So where are our site locations? So currently, I'm excited to say, so Pismo State Beach Monarch Grove went in actually January of 2022, followed by Port Hueneme Historic Cemetery, and Carpinteria Creek. We just got William R. Hearst Memorial State Beach in San Simeon put in, and then the Nipomo Native Garden in Nipomo, California. So what was really also interesting about this process was because tourism is driven on the Central Coast because of the monarchs, especially during the winter months, our county tourism industry board really wanted to support the project. So they gave us grant funding for 5 of the panels. One of them, actually 2 of them being that are already installed, which is the William R. Hearst and the Nipomo Native Garden. But in addition, they wanted to see that we really drove tourism, the tourism industry around the monarchs. So on our website, we are working currently on updating it to get these new sites listed, but also to address, what else can you see when you're here, and linking them back to the tourism boards and the chambers so that people then can figure out where to stay while they're here, and many of the other things they can enjoy while they're visiting these sites. So really driving tourism to the Western Monarch Trail and to the communities that the sites are hosted in. So what are we in the process of installing now? So we've got the Monarch Grove Natural Area in Los Osos, and that's managed by the San Luis Obispo County Parks. We have Andrew Malera State Park. They actually got their panels quite a while ago, but because of the storm damage from this past year, they haven't been able to install them. They're still cleaning up that mess, and then they'll be able to get them in the ground. Downtown Cambria, Chamber of Commerce office. So Cambria and the surrounding community there have so many overwintering sites, but a lot of them are on private land. So it was really a conversation piece about, hey, this is a migration stop for the Western monarchs, and you can see them at some of these places. However, panels couldn't be hosted there. And then there would be a demonstration garden for native plants there. San Clemente State Beach, so that's coming in the ground soon. And so they will be using the family-friendly version of it. And that's along a pathway there where they had historic overwintering sites, but as well as a native nectar garden. The Slow Botanic Garden, so San Luis Obispo Botanic Garden is hosting the family-friendly version as well. And the Santa Margarita Gateway to Nature in Santa Margarita. And so those are both more of a conversation about breeding habitat as well as nectar habitat and supporting healthy migration. Oops, backwards, sorry. All right, so where are we now? Lots of questions to be answered. I laugh at myself because I'm not quite sure where I became a butterfly fanatic, but I am so happy to be one and loving to learn all of this information about this beautiful, beautiful butterfly that played such an integral part of my youth without me even knowing, right? So there's so much to be done still. A lot of questions to be answered, as we found. So on the right-hand side picture here, you'll see the damage to the Pismo State Beach Monarch Grove. So we had huge storms in 2022 and 2023 that took a lot out of our overwintering habitat. So knocking down trees, flooding. And then, of course, there was the 58% decrease in the overwintering monarchs between the Thanksgiving count and the New Year's count. So where did they go? So, what is happening? Was it mortality? Did they move to a new location? Did the storms blow them away? So many questions. And what was really wonderful was meeting with the Xerces Society Overwintering Science meeting in March and being in the room with all of these scientists and researchers and land managers just trying to figure out what the next steps were. Now they've got some plans, they've got some steps, they know what they're going to do, they know what they're going to research and what questions they want to answer. So they have their priorities listed. You can visit that on Xerces Society and see the results of that meeting and what they're looking at. It's all very interesting, and it gives me hope that we'll be able to answer some of these questions moving forward. So although we saw an increase in our 2022 and 2023 counts here on the Central Coast and throughout the Western monarch population, we still have a lot of work to do. And the 58% decrease in those monarchs between the two counts is significant. And so we're very lucky to have the numbers increase as we did, but it doesn't mean that we're out of the woods yet. We've got a lot of work to do. So how can you help? Participating in community science projects is always critical, and I'm going to continue to push this as much as possible. So doing the Monarch Milkweed Mapper, the Monarch Mystery Challenge, I know there's several more community science projects. I know Monarch Joint Venture hosts them, as well as Xerces Society, becoming a volunteer for the counts. All of those are great places. You can find a lot of the information for these science projects on our website at westernmonarchtrail.com. Plant native nectar gardens. Plant them everywhere. The more we have, the better we're going to do. We're supporting the healthy migration of the Western monarch, as well as all the other pollinators. Avoid use of pesticides and make good choices in what you're purchasing as well. We know that we need to be, as consumers, make bigger demands for what we expect out of our growers, for not only our food, but for the plants that we put in the ground to support our wildlife as well. Advocate for habitat conservation and restoration. So reach out to your leaders and ask them to care and to make a difference in the habitats, whether it be breeding areas or it be the overwintering sites. We need to continue to conserve and restore these areas. And then, of course, I'll always ask you to help support our project, which is the Western Monarch Trail. We're excited to host the 4th annual Butterfly Ball this year. So this is the invitation that we have going for it. We only have a few tickets left. I think we're down to like 20, which is amazing and shows what support we have for this event. This year is a wonderful Alice in Wonderland. But I am really excited because this year we are expanding the Western Monarch Trail through this butterfly ball. We'll be doing some active fundraising for FEA Nature Center, and they have a beautiful nature preserve with butterfly garden and habitat in the Central Valley. So we're expanding our trail off the coast, which I'm so glad that we've had so much support for the project along the coast and in the overwintering sites. And now we get to move inland and look at breeding and nectar sites. So this will be our first one off of the coast, further inland. And we're excited to do the fundraising for this and get these panels in the ground. So FEA will be joining us at our butterfly ball to do some fundraising. So we're very excited for that. So resources, I would be remiss if I did not mention these wonderful resources. So please, if you are interested in wanting to see what our great leaders, agencies, researchers, scientists are doing for the Western monarch, visit the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies to see their Western Monarch Butterfly Conservation Plan. The Xerces Call to Action, looking at that priority action zones in California. That's the graph or the image here on the left. So where should you be planting milkweed? Where should you be planting native nectar plants, etc.? So that gives you kind of a guideline for planting. Monarch Joint Venture, California State Parks, California Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and of course, the Western Monarch Trail. We have lots of resources that actually guide you back to all these agencies as well. Also, our lovely docents and volunteers at the Butterfly Grove had kind of seen the need to have something more information about the Western monarch population in regards to Pismo Beach Monarch Grove. So they have written this amazing book, which they developed through Amazon, so it can be read digitally, listened to digitally, and then also purchased through us or on the website on Amazon. So this is an image of the book itself, as well as the information that you can find in there. I encourage you all, if you want to learn more about the Pismo Beach monarch butterflies, this is a wonderful book to read, and you'd be supporting the Western Monarch Trail and the Central Coast State Parks Association as well. Some of the other things that we've done to continue to bring awareness to the Western Monarch Trail and healthy migration of the Western monarchs. This one was our art show, particularly happy about this one. We did a call to artists in June and July and asked them to give us their story through their lens of the monarchs. We had James Dietz do this main image on the left-hand side with the monarchs in the fire. And I'll tell you what, holy smokes, did that speak to me, and why? It was because when 2020 hit and those fires burning through, and knowing that the monarchs had now dropped to, 2,000 was the count. I mean, it said that to me. So it was truly beautiful. The artists got the message, they understood the assignment, and it was phenomenal. There's a couple of other images from some of the artists there on your left-hand side. So you can see those. If you'd like to see the whole collection, you can visit www.thebunkerslow.com, Eyes of the Monarch. And you can see the whole collection there. They're just phenomenal. You can actually purchase the art as well. That supports the Western Monarch Trail. So really neat to see artists come together to support the Western Monarch. I think that's it for me today, but I look forward to answering any questions that you may have. But please feel free to reach out to me anytime. My email is partnership@westernmonarchtrail.com. And I just want to give a thank you to the donors who've really helped the Western Monarch Trail happen: Bob Shambrom, Tom and Mary Kay Ellsroth, Xerces Society, California Conservation Districts, Highway 1 Road Trip, and of course, you can always donate to westernmonarchtrail.com/donate.
Thank you so much, Kristin. Wonderful presentation. We've got a number of questions we love to ask. I even wrote down a couple of my own if we have some extra time. First of all, real quick, and if you are not sure of the answer, that's totally fine. A couple of people were asking about permission to share any of your slides. Took some screenshots and stuff. If that's okay, you can let them know. If not, we can check later and get back to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And they can always reach out to me if they want some more high quality stuff. And then I just ask that you obviously give credit where credit is due, so people know more about the Western Monarch Trail.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll start here. Could you explain a little bit more about nectar gardens and how you create them? And then what can we do to enhance, gardens maybe that we already have, or providing more nectar for our beloved monarchs?
Yeah, so I always rely on California Native Plant Society and some of those websites, because they do have some wonderful information. You can find that on linked on our website. But by nectar gardens, I mean finding native plants that bloom year round and support that healthy migration. Enhancing it. I mean, really, God, there's so many beautiful native plants that bloom year round that you can put in the garden. Well, I say year round, and I'm thinking of San Luis Obispo, so I apologize, because not everywhere is like us. So maybe not year round, but at least to support the migration in those times of year. I mean, sages come to mind, California buckwheat. Of course, depending on where you're at in the Western United States, your plants that you're going to need for that nectar garden are going to be different. But we're talking about plants that butterflies tend to gravitate towards that are native, and they have kind of a bigger landing pad for them, and they can get their nectar and food for their migration to fuel their migration. I just grabbed a copy of my 100 Plants to Feed Monarchs. Wonderful. Flipped open to goldenrod, as it is across the whole United States. Obviously, various species of that plant. But yeah, wonderful book, again, from the Xerces Society. And we will link that, as well as a number of other resources, including California Native Plant Society, in the email that we'll send out.
by Friday. We'll send that out by Friday. So thank you. Yes. Couple of questions about signage and where you're going to be posting things. This question says, will these signs also be installed further north in the Monterey area or Pacific Grove? And then kind of a sub question from this person. Also, why is it not advised to plant milkweed within 5 miles of the coast?
Yes. So our plan is to expand throughout. Of course, the limitations for most agencies is funding to put these panels in. So that's why we're fundraising to try and get these panels fabricated and then installed. It's a whole lot easier to come to an agency and say, hey, I've got grant funding and I have 2 free signs for you. Would you put them in your overwintering site or your native plant garden? They'll say yes versus, hey, and you need to come up with some funding to do it. So that's our goal, is to get them throughout and expand up into Oregon, Washington, potentially British Columbia, depending on how relevant it is as we, move forward. And then, of course, moving westward or eastward into some of our eastern states that do support a lot of the breeding and migration habitat. And then why? So why not within? So the priority zones change depending on where you are at in California. So down in Southern California, you can plant milkweed almost right on the coast, versus here where they ask you to do, at least 5 miles from overwintering sites. And that's because when we get warm here, and I mean, you would see it. I see it all the time. Like we'll have these 70, 80 degree days randomly in January, which puts the monarchs, they come out of diapause and want to start mating. And then they go to find milkweed. And if there's milkweed close by, it's typically pretty small. And then it can't sustain the caterpillars or the eggs. So really what they're asking is, instead of giving them that incentive to then lay the eggs and move, and have them go into that full breeding cycle, just let them get the nectar that's close by. And then once the full breeding happens and they move on in March, they'll actually be able to find the milkweed that's grown to the size that they need it. Also, if you plant milkweed, don't just plant one. Plant 3, 5, 10, as many as you possibly can, because those caterpillars eat a lot of milkweed and they eat it quickly.
All right, thank you. Yeah, there's another great webinar that we had just had a few months ago talking about like clumping that milkweed and, kind of within 50 yards or so, of each other. So hopefully you get your neighbors involved too.
Yes.
So how are the monarch populations in the Monarch Butterfly Sanctuary in Monterey? Do you know much about counts and numbers in that area?
I don't know as much about that, just because my focus has been so primarily here. It has been lower than it has in previous years. And what we're noticing is that the Thanksgiving count might be higher there. And then by New Year's count, it might be, higher here. We definitely noticed that here on the central or in San Luis Obispo. Our numbers were a lot higher on the Thanksgiving count. And then when it came through to the New Year's count, there's other locations in Santa Barbara that were higher. So, we know that they do move. How much they move, we don't know. And where the groves that they're moving back and forth to, we're not sure. So I know that Monterey's numbers have not been as high as they've been previously.
Thank you. Here is a question about eucalyptus trees. Before they were introduced to coastal California, what vegetation did the monarchs utilize at Pismo State Beach, Monarch Butterfly Grove, or other similar overwintering sites?
It's a great question, and one that we're all asking. It is a complete mystery. Yeah. I want to say, and don't quote me on this, but I want to say that the Pismo State Beach Monarch Grove, someone told a story there that it was the Vets Hall, and I want to say it was in the 40s that someone actually recognized that, couples went down there after the little dance to go into the trees and have some alone time, and started noticing the butterflies there. And so I don't I don't know what they roosted on beforehand. It's pretty amazing, and it would be a story I'd love to know.
Interesting. A research topic for someone.
Yeah.
Also about eucalyptus, will the damage to the eucalyptus, or with the damage to the eucalyptus, will they be replanting native pine trees, or other types of trees?
Right. It's such a great question. Okay, so here's the biggest conundrum of all, right? Eucalyptus are not native. They are invasive species to California, but the Monterey pine is also not native to San Luis Obispo County, and neither is the Monterey cypress. And those are the two other trees that they have typically been found roosting in. So what is native to our area that they would actually roost in? And that's the question. So as of right now, the priority is to continue to support the existing eucalyptus groves. And then as eucalyptus fall or have to be removed, then replanting with Monterey pines or Monterey cypress until we can find something else that's suitable. But there's so many other variables in why they pick a grove, and that includes sunlight, wind, just the general warmth of the area and the location of the area. So there's so many different variables for why they choose a space.
Interesting. So much to learn about the eucalyptus trees and their grove site choice. Will you be offering any PDF or print info for the trail?
Yes, I do have pamphlets that I'm happy to send out. If you want to just reach out to me, I can send anything out.
Awesome. Cool. And we can link to anything too on your page if you've got copies of stuff, digital copies. We can also link to that too. What are the requirements for having your signs? Is there a size requirement or number of plants required?
No. So the requirements for hosting a panel for the Western Monarch Trail is that your site is a public site that people can come visit, that we can advertise for people to come visit as part of the Western Monarch Trail and following the trail. So that's the biggest requirement there. Traditionally, we like to, if it's a demonstration garden that you're starting, that's great. And we're happy to help get that off the road, get that in the ground and moving forward. So putting in a demonstration garden for nectar or breeding habitat is great. And those kind of go together, the breeding habitat and the nectar habitat. You want both because obviously adult butterflies are going to need their nectar and lay eggs, in the same time period. So we're able to support that in whatever way, as far as getting you the resources to help develop that garden, and then obviously help with getting the panels installed or at least fabricated and designed. And overwintering sites, there are a lot of private overwintering sites, but we're really looking for those sites that people can come visit and learn something about. And honestly, unless your overwintering site is managed, you don't want people going there. You want to be able to monitor people's interactions with the butterflies in an overwintering site.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. You mentioned obviously this is a Western Monarch Trail. It's a lot of different sites that are coming together to give that education piece. More sites kind of adding to as you get the funding and whatnot. Is there a way to kind of experience the whole thing, kind of go on an epic road trip to kind of experience all of it? This was just in my way of thinking and being so type A about, well, it's a trail, let's do it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's the goal, right? So when you look at the whale trail that Donna Sandstrom put in, I mean, it's truly phenomenal. And honestly, like if you were to visit her website, that's what we dream to do. So they have sites to visit from British Columbia down into Baja. And it talks about each site and why that's important to the whales, what whales are coming through, what time of the year. So we really hope that the Western Monarch Trail would do the same thing, where it, talks about the monarchs at certain times of the year. So you'll be able to go onto our website and say, okay, we're looking at leaving in September. Where can we see the monarchs? What are the sites? And then follow them through their migration path. Or just check it out in the middle of summer and say, okay, where would they be? And be able to visit those sites.
Oh, it's beautiful. I'm envisioning it, and it's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one more question, hopefully kind of a hopeful piece to kind of end the webinar on. I was really touched by your childhood story of, wanting something more and something your brothers experienced, and having that teacher kind of push you into working in the environment. But what advice would you give to young people about getting involved, just with the environment, in the environment, with monarchs, what have you?
Yeah. Gosh, your question is so important to me, and it's parallel in where we move forward in life right now. We're looking at a generation of kids who are seeing wildlife on a screen versus seeing it and experiencing it hands-on. And without that hands-on experience with nature to really connect you to it and ground you to it, to build your roots in it, we're missing a huge chunk of who we are. And we could be losing out on our next generation of environmental stewards. So this is my plea to parents and grandparents to please get these kiddos out into nature, to get them experiencing it, to let them play in the dirt, take them on a hike, get them to appreciate our parks and open spaces, to appreciate all aspects of nature and why they're important to us as human beings and how we interact with them on the landscape, and why they are important to an ecosystem and the big picture. As I was talking to somebody else about, naturalists mean something different now, not at the micro level, but in the macro level, in the biggest picture. So my advice to anyone who's seeking, experience in nature or what they want to do with themselves, there may be those high-paying jobs, but I'll tell you what, I wouldn't change what I've done for the world. I have gotten so much more out of interacting with people, getting them to care about nature, caring about nature myself, and interacting with it, and doing meaningful work. And it does make a huge difference in who I am and how we interact with the world in general. So get out there, enjoy it, appreciate it. And then even if you can't take on the passion work, you can always join a board and volunteer time and start learning those different aspects. So just get outside.
Absolutely. I love this so much. Thank you so much for your time. We wish you all the luck in continuing to work on the Western Monarch Trail. Hopefully we've got some California people listening to get out and go visit. Again, thank you so much. Also, thank you to NCTC for hosting the webinar today, and to all of you for participating. Thank you for your questions. We hope to see you for our next webinar, where we'll be joined by Anya Majewski for her presentation on insights for 50 years of data on monarch OE infection on October 24th. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kristin, again, and everyone have a great day.
Thanks so much.